Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Monday, May 19th, 2014 edition of Intelligence Report with ShrinkForMen.com and AVoiceForMen.com. I, as usual, am Dean Esmay, Managing Editor and Operations Manager of A Voice for Men. With me again for the second week in a row is the Master of Licensed Clinical Work Disaster, Tom Golden. Say hi to everybody, Tom.
Hello to everybody, Tom.
And also Dr. T.
Hey there.
How you guys been doing this week?
Been good.
All right, we have several stories to kick off with today. I think probably the most interesting and significant one is probably the one that Tom brought to the table about the University of Michigan student who's suing. And we have some very late-breaking news that somewhat relates to that. So, Tom, what do you want to tell us about this university student, Drew Sterrett, and his case?
Yes, Drew Sterrett has been through the ringer with the University of Michigan. And it started in 2012, I think, April 23rd, when he had sex with a woman. And he had sex in the lower bunk. In the upper bunk was his roommate. And in fact, during the sexual encounter, his roommate texted him and said something to the effect of, buddy, you're too loud. You know, you need to please tone it down. There'll be payback tomorrow. So it's like the upper bunk guy said this was consensual sex. This was something where they both, in fact, what they said was that she asked him to go get a condom. And so it's pretty clear from that, if what they're saying is true, that this was a consensual sexual intercourse, whatever. So everything's fine, right? April, May, June. Over the summer, what happens? The complainant is home for the summer, and mommy reads her diary. In the diary, mommy reads that, daughter had sex with Mr. Sterrett. Daughter then says, that was actually, that was sexual assault. And so then she brings charges to the university, and then enter, what's her name, Megan Cohen?
Heather Cowan, I think.
Oh, thank you, Heather Cowan. Megan Cohen, I like it that. Thank you, Tara. But the University of Michigan then deems that he was actually guilty of sexual assault and throws him out of the school. And this is even though he had gotten information from one of the complainant's friends saying this was definitely sexual, that they had agreed on, it's consensual sex. So now the fellow is suing the University of Michigan, which makes my heart sing, because, you know, the more we do this and the more someone sues successfully, the more it's going to be unlikely that we're going to have a problem with this sort of thing. So that's kind of where we are with it right now. And that's what the article was about. And I just, I like the sound of that, because there's so many men out there. I think there's 4 or 5 suits that are now active of men doing the same thing that Drew Sterrett is doing. And to me, this is a really good sign.
I think that it is a good sign, and congrats to Drew Sterrett for doing it. We've, at A Voice for Men, been contacted before by young men who experienced something like that, and asking us what they could do about it. And generally speaking, the only answer we ever had was, well, 1, you can sue, or 2, you can come forward with your story. And rarely, I mean, we've had multiple guys just say no, they were too ashamed to come forward publicly. They were shamed out of doing it, and they were called all sorts of names, and they just wanted to get it behind me. I think the only way these Title IX abuses can be fought is actually by taking it to court, both the civil courts and the court of public opinion. If you're innocent, you should do everything you can to publicly proclaim your innocence, and damn anybody who calls you a rapist in response. If you're innocent. Men are too easily shamed by these things. Why do you think that is, Tara?
why are men ashamed of being accused of being a rapist?
I don't know. Why are they ashamed to just say it not immediately? I don't know. I mean, you would think that the immediate answer would be, bitch is lying. But that doesn't seem to be a common occurrence at all. I don't
Well,
know.
I suspect it would be if the university gave them, dealt with it in a different fashion, perhaps using the presumption of innocence. But it seems like from almost every story I've read about these miscarriages of justice that occur in collegiate star chambers, the men are immediately suspended from school, treated as if they're criminals. So one day they're in class with their friends, the next day they're gone, barred from campus. I have to imagine that for anyone, that would be a humiliating experience.
Yes. And I would add to that these are young men who have not been believed by anyone. I mean, the school tells them they're wrong, the administration tells them they're wrong, the EEO people tell them they're wrong, their friends are going, oh man, what did you do, man? Nobody believes them. When no one believes us, it's much less likely we're going to say, hey, I'm innocent. We're going to want to hide it. We're going to want to kind of get under a rock and say, let this go away because I didn't do this, but damn. So I think that's a part of it, is that they're living in a culture that assumes they're wrong, that assumes they're guilty already. All men are rapists, right?
And they become the targets. They become the targets of campus witch hunts.
And the sad fact is that false accusations are not so infrequent. And this young lady, actually, what happened here, what looks like happened here, is that she used this as an alibi. The Canaan research breaks down 3 ways that women tend to use as excuses for their false accusations. The first is over half of the women say that it's for an alibi. In other words, boyfriend finds out she had sex with so-and-so, but she really wanted to have sex with so-and-so, but she tells boyfriend, oh, he made me do it, he raped me, right? I mean, that's alibi. The second one is revenge. When women get very upset and angry, so-and-so didn't do such and such, boom, they make an accusation that's false. That was, I think, 26%. And then the other remaining, I think, is 18% is for sympathy. The poor me kind of vote. But Canaan's broken down these false accusations into categories. We can pretty much see where they are, and this young lady definitely falls in the first category as far as I'm concerned.
Did she actually admit this, or I don't know enough about
the
that?
article says that in the fall she came back and she said, well, I'm not real sure about this anymore.
Okay.
But that wasn't enough. Take Heather Cowan to change things and say, okay, we'll let this one go. It's like she just went straight ahead no matter what.
She went all Mary Collette on his ass.
I don't. Who's Mary Collette?
Exactly.
Who? Mary Collette?
Mary Collette.
Keller.
I don't know who that is.
Maine. Vladic Filler. Isn't
Oh,
that her name?
okay. Well, Mary Kellett. Yeah. Oh, yeah. By the way, Paul and a few others from A Voice for Men will be in Maine to talk about Mary Kellett and her boss, Carletta Bassano, up there in Maine in a week or 2, I think.
Yes, the end of May.
That should be fun times. That should be fun times. Paul will also be back here next week, by the way. What's interesting is that just before we went out, I mean, you're right that this is at least the 3rd, if not the 4th, case I've heard of this year of guys suing, and all I can do is cheer these guys for having the courage to do it, because in my experience, contrary to the myths, it is not women who make rape allegations who are shamed and humiliated. They're almost cheered. And from what I can see, they generally face almost no repercussions at all for making a false allegation. Like they have incentive to lie and no disincentive except their own personal sense of honor, which of course some women have, but some don't. What I thought was neat, and this came in literally less than an hour I got hold of this. This press release came out today. There is a new judicial ruling at the United States federal level in which it's interesting how it's worded, because technically, women can rape men, but we all know nobody takes that one seriously. But basically, a judge has ruled that a man accused of this may in fact sue the university employees, and the female complainant for defamation. The federal courts have ruled that a man may sue all three of those, including his accuser.
Yes, yes, and yes.
And I can see some feminist heads spinning around like Linda Blair in The Exorcist right now, and all I can say is, who fucking Ray?
Spin, baby, spin.
Right.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And I've actually, I get alerts from SAVE, the organization SAVE.
Stop Abusive and Violent Environments over in Washington, D.C.?
That is correct. And last week they sent one out, and I think they had cataloged nearly a dozen of these types of suits that are going on across the country. And I think if you really want to hurt the universities, you hit them in the pocketbook. And this is a great way to do it. I also love that they're turning around Title IX, which has been used to harm men in the past, and that's being now used to protect them, because it doesn't specify any one specific group being discriminated against. But in this case, now that men are the minority on college campuses, they are indeed being discriminated against because of their gender. So...
You remember that old Beach Boys song where they were singing how lovely it would be to have two girls for every boy? I'm like, I don't know, it sounds like a siege environment now. Oh my God, they could get me at any moment. Yeah, no, I guess we're all agreed. And not only are we glad, I mean, I suppose a federal court could overrule it, but a higher court could overrule it and say, no, you may not sue the university, but I don't see what justification they could possibly have. I especially like that he said, yes, and you may sue the employees, and you may sue your accuser. And that's as it should be, as far as I'm concerned, on anything.
Absolutely right.
Look, goddammit, if I accuse you, Tara, of molesting my little boy, and that's complete bullshit, you ought to be able to sue the pants off of me, right?
Well, absolutely. And there are cases, I wish they would become more numerous. Perhaps at some point they will. But now there are men who have gone through horrific divorce and custody battles. For instance, there's a gentleman, Daryl Ginyard, I reported on this story a few summers ago, who was awarded $852,000 in damages from his ex-wife because for about 3 years she made one bogus sexual molestation charge after the other against him and their 2 daughters. He lost his job, he lost time with his girls, and finally, enough was enough. He sued her and he won. And I wish more men would do this, and not just for the big stuff like sexual molestation charges or rape, but also for the baseless accusations of domestic violence, so some woman can get an unfair advantage in her divorce and custody case by having him removed from the home. I wish more men would sue the women who make any kind of false allegation. I can tell you, I haven't, all of the cases I've been privy to, I have yet to hear about any woman who has received any type of consequence for doing this in a divorce case. And when they do, it's usually because they've done it multiple times. The same is true of false rape accusations. When the registerher.com was first being filled with names, I went and found 50 cases and internet news stories, news items, and the only women, again, who were prosecuted for making false rape allegations were the ones who'd done it more than twice. So I guess there's an unspoken 3 false allegations, and then you might do some time.
Yeah, well, we saw at least one case of a woman who got away with it 11 times before the police finally did something about them, and that was, but of course those were false stalking and domestic abuse charges. So I guess you get more than 3 strikes on that. I love what you're saying there, except the reality is universities are a target because you can probably get a lawyer who will take you on a contingency basis because you're going to expect a big settlement or a big cash payout. I mean, your average poor schlub who's making $40,000 a year, who's having his face ground into the dirt by his ex, what's he got to sue with? Who's going to even let him sue? You know, what do they got? They got a mortgaged house that they still owe $50,000 on, and no lawyer's going to take them. That's the catch-22 of that one.
But there are men who do have means who could do this. Although I suspect that after you go through one of these cases, most people are just so tired of it they don't want to gear up for another legal battle.
But you know what? Guys who do have the means to sue would be doing actual men's rights activist work if they did it. You know what? I am going to sue her. You know, I don't care. I mean, it's a tough nut, right? Because whatever has happened, you still have to deal with your ex. That's like the hangman situation. I don't know if hangman's the right metaphor, but that's the catch-22 situation you're in. You finally settled into some kind of working relationship with your ex. You don't want to make more trouble.
Well, but yes and no. The type of woman who would do something like that,
kind of false allegation,
and get away with it, what's to stop her from doing it again?
That's right. You know? That's right.
And that's why consequences are so important. When women or men get away with doing these types of things, it only incentivizes them to do so again in the future when they want vengeance or an alibi or sympathy or whatever their motivation might be.
Yeah. So, I'll say it now. You want to do something activist? If you're in a position to actually sue your ex for false allegations, do it. That puts the fear of God into everybody who's thinking about using and abusing this system.
Well, yeah, if it were more commonplace for women to suffer consequences, real, legal, not, you should go to counseling, there's your consequence. But I'm talking serious fines, jail time, loss of custody. You know what? If it happened enough, except for the especially crazy cases, I have to believe it would be a deterrent from other individuals who might be tempted to do such a thing to not do it.
That's right. And I want to be there the first time some guy successfully sues for an ex parte a restraining order against him. I want to see somebody sue. Maybe you can't sue the court. Maybe you can. But sue your ex for getting an ex parte order with no evidence. Because those ex parte restraining orders, which are commonly granted, harm a number of your rights. As a citizen, they aren't just stay away from somebody. There's all sorts of other consequences that come to it. Why wouldn't you sue? Sue the shit out of them. If you can afford it, sue them. This reminds me of something that one of our semi-regular commenters and occasional contributors, Isaac Quill, I think he also goes by Ticklish Quill, he recommended to me about a year ago that parents who are sending their sons off to school should, to any university, should buy a copy of Helen Smith's book, Men on Strike, because she's got a whole chapter on the false allegation problem at school, at universities, and how your son can lose his educational career. He said this would be a neat form of activism. Buy a copy of that book, mark that page with a paperclip or whatever, and send it with a letter to the university president saying, by the way, if something like this is described here happens to my son, please be aware that that our family will sue you and will sue your school. Because the way that will work is a university president would be forced to read it because he can't say he didn't get it. And he looks guilty if he doesn't address it in some way. It wouldn't take more than 100 parents doing that to probably create an uproar across the United States. At Harvard, at Yale, at MIT, at Berkeley, you name the school. Just mail a copy and say to the president, make them sign for it and say, if something like this happens to my son, you will be sued. I want to know what you're going to do to protect him. It would cause quite an uproar, wouldn't it? At least I think it would.
It would, until the universities get their legal teams together and start making young male students sign liability waivers before they're admitted on campus.
I laugh, but then it's like, okay, don't send your kid there.
Exactly.
It would be a neat stunt to pull, that's for sure. I don't have a son I'm about to send to a prestigious university, but now the idea is floating in the air, and maybe something will happen. You never know.
You know, it makes me wonder about why parents aren't going to universities now and saying, the chances of my daughter being sexually assaulted are 1 in 5 to go to your school?
That's why that statistic is such bullshit. If that were the case, nobody would be sending their little homecoming queen princesses to college. I mean, it's like sending them to Darfur if that statistic
right.
is accurate. It's absolute rubbish.
Yep. Yes.
And if you believed it, I know I'm showing my age, but remember when it was a feminist issue to make colleges go co-ed? I mean, the word almost is a non-word now, co-ed. But I mean, like, because the complaint was there would be a lot of sexual assault on women in campuses if you let women onto these campuses. So apparently, the anti-feminists who didn't want women on campus were right. Is that what modern feminists are saying? It's just a clusterfuck of stupid, isn't it?
Modern feminism has segued from co-ed to special ed at this point. I agree.
Yes, and my degree in women's studies allows me to explain to you why there aren't more women engineers.
Oh boy.
You know what? Suck my dongle.
So we gotta hope that something good comes out of there. Now, this is all, of course, about young men supposedly committing sexual assault at astronomical rates. I posted something on A Voice for Men today that I had some real conscience conflicts about, but I went ahead and did it because I think it's important that people see things like this. It was called "This Is What a Child Molester Looks Like." Which is a video that's been floating around multiple internet websites, although it has a habit of appearing on websites and disappearing, which automatically makes it a news item so far as I'm concerned. Did you both get a chance to look at that video?
It's hard to watch. Yeah, I did.
It is hard to watch, and what's doubly hard to watch is, now it didn't first appear on LiveLeak, but I went ahead and grabbed a copy off of LiveLeak. If you go and look at it, if they try sending me an email saying take our copy down, no, you don't own this. And this is a news item. You look at the comments from people on there, and they're mostly just like, at least at the time that before I put them up, a lot of people saying this kid is lucky. Excuse me? You know, when I was a boy, this was my fantasy. What the hell is wrong with people? This boy is being sexually molested and assaulted by a woman who looks roughly 30 years old to me.
And pretty rough trade at that.
Yeah. And initially he's got a grin on, although if I look at that and the actual expression on his face, it looks very much like a fear grin to me. You guys familiar with a fear grin, right? No?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. People have this fear grin reaction. It's the same like when they're on a roller coaster or whatever. They're not really happy. It's just that their lips peel back, or they're trying to pretend that they're laughing when they're really quite frightened and disturbed. And by the end of that video, you can tell the boy is quite unsettled and quite disturbed. Yeah. You
mean the point at the video after she'd forcibly taken off his shirt and then was trying to pull down his shorts and underwear while saying, "Come on, show me what you got."
Finally, he didn't even have the fear grin. It was just totally shock.
He was in shock, and it wasn't fear grin. He just looked incredibly uncomfortable and afraid. Yes. And then the crowd was cheering and hooping and hollering and laughing while this was going on.
Now, I don't know where this is. I don't know where it happened. A few people have guessed somewhere in England. I just don't know. I'm not sure I care, because the fact is that if you look buried into the statistics, it's never on the top line reports of statistics, but if you really look into it, the rate of women doing things like this to men, and especially to boys, is much higher than most people believe. Maybe the two of you can speak to this with a little more expertise than I have, but I came across at least 3 studies done in the 1980s, for example, and this is just, I'm not saying that this is what's going to happen to this little boy, but at least 3 studies in the 80s showing that a majority of men convicted of rape in prison, and this is back in the 80s when there were still things like presumption of innocence, right? Between 60 and 80% of them had been sexually abused in some manner by a woman in childhood. I'm not saying this kid's going to turn into a rapist, but and has everybody forgotten that connections like that exist in the psychiatric field? You tell me. Or did I just lay something on you'd never even heard before?
No, I think that boys are definitely forgotten in the psychiatric field. You know, it's like they're just not.
No, but I'm specifically saying they're at higher risk to become sexual offenders themselves if things like this happen to them.
You know, Dean, when I saw that, the first thing that came to my mind was a workshop for women to stop rape. What you need to do is keep other women from raping young boys. You know?
Yeah.
It's like,
how would that fly, right?
so simple. So simple.
That's right. Women can stop
All
rape.
you hear is only men can stop rape, but that's not true. You know, maybe women need to stop other women from abusing young boys, and therefore the number of rapists will come way down.
That's right. I mean, is either one of you just going to disagree with me that this boy was sexually assaulted?
No, absolutely not. That was
Oh, it's-
wrong on many levels. What happened to him?
Yeah.
It's humiliating. Just
I really felt for the kid. You know,
I did too. And no, I'm not saying he's going to grow up to be a sexual offender. I'm just saying this sort of thing is more common than anybody wants to believe it is. And it almost like seeing is believing. That was probably was the main reason I put it on A Voice for Men. Seeing is believing. I've heard, oh, come on, about this stuff so many times. I'm sick of hearing it.
So yet another female. There was one not too many. Was it? I think it was just last month. We did a story on the teacher. Was she in Texas? Who gave a lap dance in her classroom to a prepubescent boy.
I think he was 15. So, well, I don't know, but it doesn't matter.
I thought he was 12. Was he 15 or 12? I can't remember. But underage in a classroom, a teacher giving a lap dance to a student.
And supposedly, yeah, Tucker Carlson, famous conservative pundit, said this is probably the best thing that ever happened to that boy.
And I just want to snap his little bow tie.
Pop his head completely off, yeah.
Exactly. Wind it up like a propeller and watch it go.
The fact is that if you even watch, I mean, I remember we mentioned this too. That boy was going to have to pretend he enjoyed it, whether he did or not. And if you watch this video, which admittedly is of a much younger man, you can see what we're talking about, what we're saying there, because this boy is trying to pretend that this is all funny when it starts. He's got a fear grin on, but he's trying to laugh, and he's trying to pretend that this is fun and funny.
He's trying to please everyone.
Huh?
It's obvious he was trying to please everyone there.
Right.
Like, yes, aren't I lucky? I've got a middle-aged slag with tattoos up and down her back, pinning me down and shoving her saggy stretch mark tits in my face. I'm a lucky guy.
Into my pants. This is so much fun. This is the best thing ever. No, it's not. And just assuming, I don't know. It's disturbing. But I will say it again. I don't know whether it's something psychological or what. It's like, because I've run across many stories like this. I've experienced things. Well, I haven't experienced anything quite like that. But I've talked to guys who've been through stuff like that. And yet you tell people that the rate of female-on-male sexual predation is much higher than most people want to admit. And I hear it all the time. Oh, come on. Oh, come on. And so when you actually, in the rare act of catching it on video, maybe people will believe better.
But here's how the brazenness of it. Not that it makes it any better if you're predating, in a private, secluded area. This happened on public transportation. It looked like they were on a subway car.
Or a bus.
But they were on a form of public transportation, and this woman just felt completely empowered to do this to this little boy.
And what you saw there was, sometimes they call it the madness of crowds. It's just everybody's into it.
And it took about, 2 minutes or however long it all started. I don't know if the video was the entire episode before someone said, okay, that's enough, stop it.
And there may have been, I don't know, we don't know, because was this woman drinking? Maybe, maybe not. It doesn't really excuse it.
Doesn't matter, but
it wouldn't surprise me if she had been. I mean, but this stuff is serious, and I remember even, I'm not calling her out to pick on her because she's not stupid about these things, but I remember talking to my ex about our boys and them possibly being sexually molested, and she was talking men. I said, what would you do if our 7-year-old, if you found our 7-year-old, one of his teacher writing him? She said, I'd kill her. And then suddenly she took it seriously. Like, none of it made sense to her until I made it personal. And she's like, oh, that could happen, couldn't it? I guess I'm wandering around about it, but somehow some people just don't relate to statistics, do they? They have to be shown something before they believe it. Does that make sense?
Or it has to happen to them or someone they care about before it reaches them.
And also, oftentimes, the abuse of boys is more subtle than penetration of a penis into something. Like, what is this kid going to tell his parents when he goes home, or tell someone? She was sitting on my lap, and she was moving. I mean, that's the only thing he could say, really, right? And his parents go, oh, that's nothing. That's nothing at all. Don't worry about it.
And it was like she was tickling me, but it kind of hurt a little. But
and then she tried to take my pants off.
Yes. But then, think about it. If it had been a little girl and a man had done the same thing, and she had gone home and said, this man was on top of me, pushing up against me, the parents would be outraged. So oftentimes for boys, what's happening to them that's abusive is much more subtle. I've worked with lots of men over the years who've been sexually abused, and a lot of times with the men, it's much more subtle. I can't tell you how many times some of the men say to me, my mom would come and she'd take her clothes off in front of me and ask me to tell her how beautiful she was. Is that abuse? Absolutely. That's just a cut those boundaries just sharply. Well, what's he going to do to cry? He can't say, I've been abused by my mother. Because it's not quite, it's not like penetration, it's something very different, more subtle, but it leaves him hurt, and it leaves him damaged in some ways,
It does, and it doesn't necessarily mean he becomes a criminal or totally screwed up, but I mean, in some ways, it's going to do damage. You look at this little boy, for example. This is going to in some way impact when he actually hits puberty and starts interacting with the opposite sex on that level. It just is. It's likely to make him a little more nervous around them, or it might make him a little more inclined to be angry around them. I don't know.
The research is very clear. It says that boys and girls who've been abused sexually have pretty much the same kind of psychological consequences. It's not like the girls are victims and the boys are not. The boys have very similar consequences, but yet no one wants to see it, nobody wants to touch it, and everybody wants to kind of push it aside. But girls, let's do something quickly. Let's get out there and save the day.
Let's make a Twitter campaign.
Yeah.
Men can stop this. We have, I don't know if it's a question or not, but Paul Wilson says, here in the UK, that child that you're on about would probably get done for assault on that woman. This is how mad it really is in the ministry on men and boys here in the UK. Possibly. I don't have any, I have trouble thinking that a jury would look at that and go with that. But you just never know in this day and age, do they? And here's another one. This is not a question, more of a statement, but that's all right. In the piece of the night says, not a question, but I would just like to point out that Pamela Anderson just revealed that she was sexually abused from the age of 6 onwards by a female babysitter.
Really?
Pam is a famous woman, so people will care more about it, but it tells people women can do sexual abuse.
Yes.
And the excuse I'll often hear, well, yes, but it's so much rarer. It's so much rarer. Like, A, that would make it not matter, but B, I don't believe it's that rare. I really don't. And there's statistical reasons to believe it's not. And I'm talking to two psychotherapists who tell me they've seen it more than once in their practice.
Oh, yeah.
Is there something statistically odd about the two of you that you run across it commonly?
No, I think that people, although I bet, Dean, that some therapists will hear the men talk about this and they won't touch it. It'll just go by. They won't see it as abuse.
I could tell you for a fact that as somebody who was sexually abused, I saw several psychotherapists over my over the last 30 some odd years. Not a single one even ever asked me if something like that had happened to me.
Right.
Not a single one.
Right.
And it never occurred to me that I ought to talk about it.
Right. Yes, because men don't see it as abuse. That's not the way it's held in their biocomputer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I suppose someone might say, well, that's because it's not. Well, no, yeah, it is.
Well,
yeah, it is. You don't have to become traumatized and curl into a ball to realize, wait a minute, this has impacted how I've seen women my whole life.
I'm not saying it's not traumatic. I'm saying that men don't frame it in terms of abuse, because that's one of the things that was screwing up all the numbers before, is when the research would ask the men, have you been abused as a child? Every one of them would say, nah, never been abused. But then if you ask the question, did anyone touch your genitals? Did anyone put a finger or anything up your butt? I mean, then they say, yeah, that happened, you know?
Right.
But don't frame it in terms of abuse. So it has thrown the numbers off for years, and it's just recently that the research is starting to ask questions like that, what actually happened to you, rather than have you been abused.
Well,
those men won't answer. Men will tell you the truth about what happened.
That's exactly right. I mean, there for over 30 years now, there have been public education campaigns all about how women are abused, but nothing comparable to men. So just even asking men, are you the victim of abuse? I mean, I hear one abuse horror story after the next, day in and day out in my practice.
Yes.
But for a lot of men, even though the behavior is horrible, it's hurtful, it's scarred them, it's caused trauma, they still have a hard time identifying it using the word abuse.
My mama whipped me with a belt so hard that I had stripes on my butt and couldn't sit down for a whole day. Well, no, I wasn't abused. Right?
I was punished.
Uh-huh. Yeah, right. Until you say, you know what, that really is excessive. Well, maybe.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I do worry sometimes. I think we've cranked up the victim mentality a great deal onto women with a lot of inflated statistic, and we've cranked it way the hell down on men. I suppose some are sitting here listening thinking, well, you want men to think more of themselves more as victims now. Is that what you're saying? You want more people to have a victim complex, Tom? Cara, is that what you're
No, that's not what I'm saying. In fact, I'd like there to be less abuse. But in order to decrease a social problem like abuse, you need to be able to identify it and deal with it, not just sweep it under the rug, not ignore it because it's not happening to the gender we perceive as weaker or the victim. So no, I don't want to promote victim status in men, but I think we can help men who have been and are victims of abuse without buying into some type of feminist victim, professional victim. I don't even know what to call it. It's almost become a religion for them.
Well, I think we have a tendency to treat women like if they've been sexually or even physically abused, that it's the worst thing that ever happened to them, and it's now part of their identity. In some way, it is their identity. and we teach men to, inadvertently, by just ignoring it, we teach men to just pretend it's not a thing, like it just doesn't exist. So in a way, that's abuse of women instead of encouraging them to
Well,
work.
for very practical purposes, we need to recognize it and identify it and call it what it is, if for no other reason than to get men similar services to what female victims of abuse currently have.
That's right, and maybe more sensible services in the sense of, okay, something really bad just happened to you. That was pretty traumatic. Now, how are we going to build a plan for you to get on with a normal life and not let this define the rest of your existence?
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Yes,
What? Okay.
I think men find a different path to heal. Men are not going to want to make a plan and sit and talk about it. That's not been my experience with men.
Really? Okay, interesting.
What I've seen that's really helpful is when two men who had similar abuse histories found out that each other had the same kind of history, immediately they glommed onto each other. They became completely close. They would do projects together that kind of honored their mutual pain and helped something out in the future. So it's like they're being pulled into the future to do something about it. And that's the way men tend to tell that story. That's the way men tend to heal. Very different from the feminine side, which kind of just sits and talks.
Well, I know that's the thesis of your book, How Men Heal, and what was the other one, Swallowed by a Snake?
Yeah.
Fascinating reading. But I think that's kind of what I meant by formulate a plan anyway. I mean, men as a rule, maybe Tara will disagree, I don't think she will, don't like sitting around emoting and talking about their feelings. Or they've got about 10 minutes of that in them, and they're done.
Some men will talk for more than 10 minutes, but I find that my work with men, comparatively, generally speaking, compared to my work with women, is much more active. And we're focusing on things they can do to put themselves back together, and not necessarily inside the therapy office or my virtual therapy office, but what they can go out and do during the week, in between sessions, to start feeling better, to get on the path to moving past what has happened to them and making better choices in the future. I mean, in terms of getting into another relationship with another controlling, abusive, whatever.
How not to do that. That's a good one right there, right?
I'm not saying that men should not talk about things. In fact, men get a lot from talking about things. It's just their safe place to be able to talk is very different. These two men would talk about things when they're shoulder to shoulder doing something. That's when it's safe to kind of bring it up.
Well, it's that shared experience, and I see it not necessarily in my office, but if you read through the comments section on my website or in the forum, it's like seeing comrades who've been through the same war come together, and maybe they've never met before, but it's an instant recognition. And man, were we married to the same woman? Did you have a video camera in my house? And they do, and they bond. And now, I mean, through the forum, I have they've people in the forum are now taking it into real life, and they're doing meetups where they pick a equidistant location in their region, and they get together and they have dinner. And I think that that's so great. I really do.
Excellent.
And they probably joke about it, and then if they don't feel like talking about it, they go and do something like play pool or what the hell ever.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting near the end here, but I do see another comment. Someone submitted. It says, it's hard to see it as abuse when it's so public. People are pointing and laughing, and you feel humiliated and powerless to do anything because we must respect girls. We're never taught to know when a girl stops deserving that respect. Exactly. It's not allowed. That's from Mickey Shrug. That's a really good point, dude. It's not a question.
Well, let me put this out there to any men or younger men or even teenage boys who might be watching this. You don't have to automatically respect a person just because they happen to be a woman. Respect is earned, not a God-given right based on someone's gender. And if someone is actively disrespecting you, like that whatever that creature was on that subway with that little boy, you don't have to respect her.
No, we've got to actually, and God, this makes us so controversial, but I don't care. We've got to lose the whole respect women mentality. We need to lose it. If you're ever going to see women as human beings and as equals, that means they don't get automatic respect, just like men don't get automatic respect. It was almost shattering to me the first time somebody said that out loud. Like, they just said something crazy. You can't say that. You're supposed to respect women. I was taught that my whole life. I grew up in a very conservative background, by the way, not a feminist one. But feminists seem to have latched on that old chivalrous attitude pretty deeply. Respect women. Why? Does this woman deserve my respect? What's she done to earn it? I mean, she gets the basic respect anybody does. Hello, how are you? Thank you, please. But other than that, what respect does any person deserve but what they've earned, right?
That's correct.
And we got to start teaching our young men that, and older men, that it's okay to hold that attitude. Or so I think. All right, we've been going a little ways now and wandering around a little bit, but I had one funny story that came up that just made me laugh and laugh and laugh. George Takei, Lieutenant Sulu from the 1960s, got himself in trouble with some feminists.
Uh-oh.
George
You're going to give him a Vulcan death grip.
I love George Takei, and I'm sure he's not in serious trouble. He's got millions of fans, but he's got this great Facebook page. I believe it may be the most popular Facebook page on Facebook. If not, it's certainly one of them. I mean, just millions. And I go in there periodically because every day he posts something really funny. And the other day he posted something saying, "My girlfriend wishes I could see things from her point of view." I agree, and there's a picture of a woman looking down, taking a picture of
taking a breasty, I think is what it would be called.
Maybe you could call it, just looking at the breasts and down in her pants. Like, I agree, I want to see it from her point of view too. And it's just funny. And what's double funny is he appears to have gotten it off of a lesbian site.
A website called Lizzie the Leslie. So yes, I'm going to guess that the Lizzie the Leslie blog is indeed published by a woman who is a lesbian.
And gee, why do I think lesbians in relationships also sometimes frustratedly say, "I wish she could see things from my perspective"? It's just funny. And then you have this story, and some kind person on Imgur was kind enough to capture the whole thing of feminists arguing, starting with dislike, sexist and pickish, I expect better from Takei, I'm removing this from my feed, typical male reaction to a plea to be understood as human, sexist, objectifying, alienating. Tara, say something. Save us.
Well, yeah, the objectification of women by another woman, by Lizzie the Leslie.
Yes. What is the oldest joke in the book about feminists? How many feminists does it take to change a light bulb? That's not funny! I guess I just got to encourage people to go read that whole long exchange somebody was kind enough to put up on Imgur of just people going back and forth and back and forth. George Takei is the sweetest and gayest man on the internet, and really nice and really kind. And actually, if you ask him, I'm certain he would say he's a feminist. Yet he can't even post a joke image like this without people losing their shit. I don't know. Anybody else want to say anything about that?
Some people just can't pick a joke.
No, they really can't.
Yeah.
They really can't.
Well, what I want to know is if the feminists protesting the objectification in this meme, or what they claim is objectification, I want to know how many of them went topless at their local slut walks.
No lie, no lie. And
Yeah.
actually, while we probably don't have a time for it, I really actually do have a thesis that objectification of another person is probably not actually psychologically possible for most people, male or female. I don't know if the human animal is capable of looking at another human being, even just a body part, and not thinking that's another human being. I don't think our brains can do it.
Yeah, except if you're a sociopath, maybe.
Well, maybe if you're a sociopath, right?
That's about it. I think you're right.
Or not even body part. Well, I mean, look, that's not true. Men are certainly objectified as well. They're objectified in different ways. Utility.
Even if you look at what turns men on sexually, we all know what it is on the physical side. It's the boobs, it's the butt, it's the legs, it's whatever. The number one predictor is she looking you in the eye?
Mm.
Which is why cover girl models and pinup girls and all that are always looking straight at the camera.
Uh-huh.
You in the eye.
Huh.
And it's been shown that that is actually the number one attraction for a man. They may be looking at other things, but if she's not looking you in the eye, that's not very exciting. Even strippers do it. They look their clients in the eye. They make more money that way.
Good to know if I ever need to moonlight.
If you ever need to become a stripper, remember. I guess it's hard to do during a lap dance, but when you turn around, make sure and look him in the eye. You'll get better tips.
Oh, God.
Get better what?
Tips.
Oh, tips.
Tips. Yeah. TIPS. That's right. Okay, we've been running much too long here, but we got a couple of good comments. I'm just going to get them out, and then we'll say goodnight, I think. Paul Wilson says, in addition to Mickey Shrug's comments, he says, women are seen to give us sex. Men are seen as getting sex from women. Thus, when a woman does it to the boy, she's seen by others as if she is giving rather than abusing. It's a mad world, and that's a great comment. It's true.
Yes.
And I don't know if this is true, but I hope it is. Somebody called Dre Z says, Dean, you cannot sue over abuse of the ex parte process in a VAWA complaint. My ex got caught filing police reports and got caught perjuring herself. Judge wouldn't pursue it, and my attorney refused to pursue a lawsuit. Man, I am really sorry to hear that happen to you, but I would like to see somebody else try it. Somehow this madness has to end.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And we didn't get to everybody's comments or questions, but they'll still be there below. Okay, so once again, I just want to encourage everybody to come to the conference in Detroit, the first international conference on men's issues. Tom Golden will be there. Dr. Tara Palmatier will be there. Paul will be here back here next week. Tom, you got anything else you want to close with?
No, I'm looking forward to seeing Paul next week.
Excellent. All right, Dr. T, you got anything more?
I too look forward to seeing Paul, and we'll be back with our regular Going Mental on Wednesday as
Next
well.
week.
And live long and prosper.
Excellent. Peace out, nerds. Oh, I forgot to mention, if you are in an abusive relationship or think you might be in the one, please visit shrinkformen.com. And if you're interested in any of this other stuff, see avoiceformen.com. See y'all later. Live long and prosper. Bye-bye.